The female lead tells women's stories. Remarkable, diverse, inspiring. An educational charity promoting positive female role models who show the many different routes to success and fulfillment.
So often I hear people saying, oh, how do I get started? How do I do this? How do you do it? You just start. You have to begin. And it won't be perfect and it'll be messy and it'll be hard, but you're doing something and you're on your way.
Empowering future generations of women through films and a book of 60 women donated to 18,000 schools in the UK and USA, reaching millions of young people. And through our female lead societies, we help girls to discover new role models that speak to their passions, ambitions, and careers. Through our research into social media and mental health, we found a solution to the negative impact of social media on teen girls. Through a simple intervention which encouraged girls to follow different influencers, we were able to change their entire social media experience and sense of well-being. We called this campaign Disrupt Your Feed, and it reached 20 million people on social, with 330 million impressions all over the globe. So what's next? As well as inspiring girls, we're now finding ways to measurably improve the lives of older women through data, research, and the stories of those who have overcome challenges and found their own personal versions of success. We're a long way from being finished. Join us in our mission.
Are we going to talk about women's rights again? Yes, we're going to talk about it until there's balance.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Female Lead let me start again. Welcome to our Female Lead LinkedIn Live. We're in partnership with our lovely friends at Organon, a global healthcare company with a mission to deliver impactful medicines and solutions for a healthier woman. We're going to talk about women's health and work. I'm Edwina Dunn. I'm founder of the Female Lead, and in this session we're going to listen to the health issues women most want to talk about, where they need the most help, all the way from menstruation to menopause. We want to break through the stigma and empower women so that they start to speak out, that they unmute themselves, and in so doing, they start to improve their life experiences. So we really want to hear from you, please. I know you're all very lively. You join us from all over the world. Please do ask your questions. We really value them and appreciate them. So let me introduce you to our fabulous expert panel. We have the amazing Wendy Lund, who is hello, Wendy, who is the Chief Communications Officer at Organon, and she will share insights and findings from women who have been voicing their experiences. We also have our very, very close and valued Dr. Terri Apter, Cambridge University professor, Cambridge University psychologist and author, and she's going to help us understand the deeply ingrained stereotypes within society, the myths and the persistent problems that are out there. And then finally, but by no means least, the wonderful Dr. Charis Chambers. Dr. Chambers is an OBGYN, and she's also rather colloquially known as the period doctor. She's a physician, a medical expert on topics that all relate to reproductive health. And she wants women to understand their bodies free of judgment, shame, and marginalization, which sounds like a tremendous goal and ambition. So if I may, with those introductions, let us start, please, with Dr. Apter. Your pioneering research sets the stage for this conversation. What have you observed that applies to women's beliefs and behavior, specifically in the workplace?
Well, my most recent observations come from the Female Leads Women at Work project, and we spoke to 70 women throughout the UK about their experiences in the workplace. And we observed a common set of beliefs and behavior that we called unentitled mindset. So this is the belief that you're not worthy, you don't deserve more than what you have. You don't deserve better promotion, better status, better pay. Even though on some level you know you deserve it, you feel you really shouldn't have it, and you certainly shouldn't ask for it. And this was so surprising for us because in the same context, we heard these women speak forcefully and proudly about their ambition, about confidence in their abilities, about their drive. And overall, they had very, very high self-esteem. But in certain situations, in particular about about pay negotiations, their confidence just fizzled out. And instead, we found these shadow voices saying, who do you think you are? You know, you should be the woman who is grateful for what she's given. You shouldn't ask for more. And if you do, you will be punished in some way. You know, you will be told, keep in your place. You're difficult to work with. You're never satisfied. We never give you enough. There's no point in trying. And so when they thought about asking for what they knew on some level they deserved, they sort of froze, and they could ruminate for weeks, sometimes months, about whether their case was watertight, whether their case was legitimate, and whether they would know how to ask for it in the right way. And what was so also exciting at this time was while we were writing the report and interviewing these women, there was research coming out of the Harvard Kennedy School that showed that you could deactivate these shadow voices, these voices reminding you to keep you in your place, shadow voices that are sort of built up out of very denigrating gender norms that most of the time these women could stand back from and answer back to and challenge, but in certain circumstances they found they couldn't. But what research was showing was that if you change the environment so that you have support, so that what you're doing is demystified, so that other women see other women being given what they deserve, then those shadow voices will subside and they will no longer be self-muting. And this is a model that you can take from our report and what we saw in the workplace when it came to pay negotiations, this model of deactivating these shadow voices and unmuting women. You can set this not only to the workplace in terms of pay negotiations, but you can also look at it in terms of health and well-being.
Very good. A really great synopsis. Thank you. Wendy, let me turn to you. Empowering women to raise their voices and become stronger advocates for their own health, I know is central to your mission at Organon. How are you leading this change?
Thank you, and Edwina, great to be here. And Dr. Apter, your comment so both compelling and realistic for what's happening in today's world in terms of making sure that as women, we do feel entitled when it comes to things like pay, but also for good health. And so, our company was really founded on this whole idea of this vision of a better and healthier every day for every woman. And so when we launched as a company, we also launched a commitment. And that commitment was to listen to women and work to meet her unmet healthcare needs. Leading up to the first few days as our company, some of the insights we had were that women were absolutely exhausted in general, but super exhausted because of COVID. And another insight we had was that, as our first days kind of came before us, we saw that women were talking, but that they really felt that no one was really listening. So that really struck a chord with us. And as a company, we set out to listen to women, which it turned out to be quite a bold platform in many ways, although it seems very simple. And it, really, really struck a nerve. So we created this symbol of a global microphone and used that throughout all of our efforts because we really wanted to communicate with absolute specificity that our intention and our commitment was to listen. And we also asked women to let us know where they felt their healthcare needs were not being addressed, which is very rarely asked of women. And we launched a website, hereforherhealth.com, where we received thousands of responses. And it really just underscored just how much work we have to do as a society to achieve the type of health equity that women really deserve today. It also showed how much stigma is attached to health issues, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about today, even those that are just quite common. I'm sure Dr. Period will have a lot to say on this matter. And so we've, as a company, Organon has hit the ground running in terms of translating those unmet needs into action. And, it will clearly take many, many people and many organizations working together. But we do expect that Organon will be a meaningful part of that conversation as the only large healthcare company that is really specifically dedicated to advancing women's health and listening to her and looking for ways to solve for her.
Which is a very big and bold and brave plan. And I'm excited for it. Now, Dr. Chambers, you are the period doctor, but I know you also talk about menstruation, which is a really common experience for women. Can you talk to us about where this kind of shame and stigma comes from? What do you see? What have you learned?
Yeah, so again, thank you for letting me be here, for the invitation, for this wonderful panel to just be here and to talk about something that's super, super important. And to everyone who's tuned in, I'm so grateful that you guys are here. When it comes to shame and stigma, in my experience, and just to kind of clarify that, I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. And so I take care of women at all stages of their lives, but I've actually subspecialized in adolescent gynecology. And so when I'm talking with my teens, especially, you realize that the reason the shame and stigma is still present is because we haven't unlearned it or meaningfully addressed it on a generational level, cross-generationally. And that comes from when you start your period. In my scenario, my mother, who was amazing and loving, gave me, the products I needed and said, no one should know you're on your period. And that was kind of like her little nugget. And so that made me feel like, oh, am I in like a secret society? Like, what does this mean? But at the same time, it kind of gets wrapped up and sometimes taught that it's your own personal inconvenience. This is something we hide. This is something we don't talk about. And for that reason, I believe that leads to a conflation of what is normal. Right. And so the abnormal may be viewed as normal. And so you don't talk about it. You don't bring it up. You don't ask for relief because you feel like you should be suffering through it. And so I think it boils down to a need for education and cross-generational education so that we can unlearn a lot of this.
Well, I think we're going to talk about this a lot more, and I'll come back to you in just a moment, if I may. But let me first ask, this kind of grin and bear it attitude around pain is really clearly one of our cultural norms. Dr. Apter, what does your research tell us that discourages women from advocating for what they need?
Well, I think, it's wonderful for a young woman, for an older woman to be in Dr. Chambers' office and to be able to hear, I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to change the norms. So this isn't something that you have to hide, because this isn't something that's shameful. But we also have to think about, well, what happens to those women when they go out, when they step out of that office? What's the next step? And I think what happens to women when they don't grin and bear it, when they talk about their pain, particularly chronic pain, especially in a workplace. And the women have said to me that they feel that they're seen as oversensitive or weak or less robust, less reliable, even less rational, because so much of the chronic pain that women do experience to a far greater extent than men, it's often linked to hormones. And hormones, of course, are seen as the antithesis of rationality. So if your problem is hormonal, you must be irrational. What do we need? Well, we need a shift in work cultures, because most work cultures adhere to a very rigid template that the good worker is someone who comes in every day, who stays all day, who toughs it out if he's ill or if he's not feeling well, who requires no adjustment whatsoever for either his health or family health. But of course, real diversity requires a culture in which employee well-being matters, and we have to rethink that rigid template, and we have to be responsive to individuals and their individual needs. So it's a real shift in what counts as being a good employee, because a lot of these employees who have chronic pain are also incredibly valuable to the organization.
Yes, I really like that. I mean, we've been talking about sort of women as a group, but I think you draw out something that is really, resonates with me very strongly. Women are not all the same. They're different. They have different needs. And what I'm excited about is we now have big data to prove and quantify this. And that in itself is a huge step forward.
But we also have, I think Wendy was willing to talk about some of her personal experience here, and, combining, as combining the big data with the individual cases is just so exciting. Yeah.
I mean, I think this whole idea about grinning and bearing it for women in the workplace is so incredibly true and relevant to so many different areas and so many different things we go through as women. One example for me, which I kept very much to myself for many, many, many years, is that I suffered from endometriosis, and I would go into work and I would not be feeling well. And I would be in, we didn't telecommute back then. And I would be in incredible amounts of pain, and you would never have known it if you worked with me. And then I would go off into my office and, take whatever medication I was taking at this point to relieve the pain, probably some kind of a leave or something. And then I'd come out with smiles on my face. So it's really very challenging. And, we need to find ways to allow women and to kind of empower women to talk about these things, because they're natural and they're part of what she's dealing with on a daily basis.
It's a very powerful, very poignant story that you share there, Wendy. And, and I think the important thing for us all to remember is women don't need fixing, they need understanding. And I really strongly believe you can't solve a problem until you understand it. So, just as the early data science pioneers like me who explored the different needs of consumers, we now need to understand and respond to the different needs and ambitions of employees. And I think this is very much the new frontier of data science and understanding. We need to understand this huge minority of 51%, right, called women. And if we don't understand this, a very large minority, how can we understand different groups, different diversities, this is the one we must face into. But anyway, enough of me. Let's talk about periods. It's still sensitive at work, but of course, menopause is a whole new level of taboo. What are you hearing, Wendy, about menopause, especially about women at work? What are the things that you're hearing?
I think that could be summed up in one word, which is nothing. And this is something I think many of us would like to see change. So I think what's so shocking is that when it comes to women at work talking about menopause, you really don't hear anything. And that's reflective of the silence and the stigma that surrounds menopause in general that many of us have kind of grown up with over the past few years. It's a timely question because we actually decided to post about menopause this year on World Menopause Day at Organon just a few days ago, in recognition that women don't have to enter menopause alone and in the dark, which many women do. And you'll see on our social channels, particularly on LinkedIn, where these work conversations happen, we're looking for ways, as we talked about today, to unmute women about what is a natural process and help them embrace and even find ways to celebrate this change. I just have to say, kind of looking on my own personal experience here again, when I had my first period, it was celebrated as a rite of passage into womanhood. My mother packed me up. She took me to a department store. She bought me a diary. She told me to start to write in it. My aunt and my cousins and everyone kind of said, this is great, and rallied around it. And, we talked about it with our friends, even as young as we were, and family members. But with menopause, we are so much more alone. And too often, there are very few that have the information they can benefit from. And it just doesn't have to be this way. So the truth of the matter is that our bodies are going through a perfectly normal transition that we need to be empowered to talk about openly, like we're doing today on this panel. And let me just offer one more thought, is that it's not only at work where women need to unmute. If you look at disease burden data, you won't find data on menopause. Information on symptoms are simply not captured. So we not only have to start having this conversation about menopause with women, we really need to bring it out in an open way to larger society.
Well, to that exact point, I would love, Dr. Chambers, for you to share what have you learned, what can you help us with, and frame for us to start to ask maybe the right questions. How can we get women to really speak up and get what they need? Because embarrassment hides all of that. You need to give us maybe an open language.
Absolutely. So a lot of the times, what I'm doing is coaching patients on how to be active and involved and really show up for their doctor's visits. Because when it comes to our health and our wellness, we really need to partner with a healthcare provider who will hear us and who will partner with us to kind of work collaboratively to come up with a solution. And those solutions don't need to fit everyone. It's not a one size fits all. It's very customized. And so what I tell my patients is, for number one, reframe this visit. This is not Dr. Charis's visit. This is your visit. You are the event, the occasion. This visit wouldn't be happening without you, so be that main character. This is about you, and own it. Whatever you want from this visit can happen because I'm here to help you. And so I actually see my teens, their eyes kind of open up. They're like, oh, well, when you put it that way, I had a question about, and then they start to actually participate because they feel they have the license to do so. And so that's how you unmute. You say, I welcome your voice here, and so the reframing of that visit, reframing your interaction with your provider, I think is super important. The other things I say is bring a list of must-have here. I need a plan for this pain. I need something that gets me through the pain at work, as Dr. Wendy Lund said, because I need to show up, I need to perform, or I have a big event coming up, a panel, and I can't be in pain during that. I need a plan. And then I need you to have a list of things that I cannot do this. I will not be taking this type of medication. I can't have a medication that makes me drowsy because I'm a pilot, or something that says this is not something that suits me. And you do those things, as Dr. Apter mentioned, you do those things when you're most powerful. Do it before your visit so that those shadow voices aren't there. If you're most powerful in your joggers on your couch, you wear those joggers, you make that list. Or in your heels or your power suit, make that list then when you're in feeling your best self. And you can have that reflection in that moment. And so those are just a few of the things that I tend to do. Oh, and my final thing, because I have the introverts like myself, actually, who, when they're at the doctor, they just want to be there. They want to get a prize for best behaved patient, which doesn't exist, by the way. And so they don't want to be confrontational. They have questions or they're not feeling so great and they don't know how to present that. And so I always say, ask a question. So if you're like, man, I don't like this medication, frame it as a question. Is this the only way? If they're saying you must have surgery, you must have a hysterectomy, is there any way to preserve my fertility? Or what if I want to have children? What if I want to have children sooner? What if I don't tolerate this medicine? Frame it as a question so that you can get your answer without kind of being combative or confrontational. And so if you're ever worried about tone, I find that framing things as a question really works well. Those are my tips.
They are really fresh tips. I haven't heard these things. And as you say it, I go back over some of the visits I had, to doctors in the past. And, that is really taking the lead, isn't it? It's really framing it your way. I love it. Let me ask Dr. Apter, how do you suggest women talk about the realities they're facing with employers?
Well, with employers, it's good to already have had that wonderful conversation with Dr. Chambers, so they know what they're clear in their minds, what their problem is, what they need to manage, what makes their work feasible and not feasible, and what the range of options for management are. That's really important. So when they go to their employer, they're not saying, I have this problem, can you, the employer, solve it? They're saying, I need to manage this and I can manage it in a variety of ways. And all I need from you is responsiveness as to what ways work best for you. I mean, we're beyond the medication question, of course, by this time. We're now on to terms of time or, times of day or, whatever it is that they feel they need to continue to make a contribution to that organization and to grow their talents. Now, all of this very nitty-gritty conversation about how to manage it will go a long way towards helping them take away that very, very negative view of menopause, because we can say it's natural, but I think we need to say even more than that, because it's associated so closely with aging, with no longer being desirable, which means in female terms, you may not even have any use anymore. It's often associated with being invisible. And there's some research coming out from both psychologists and evolutionary psychologists, which put a very different spin on menopause. Instead of saying, well, it's the end of your reproductive life, so therefore it's the end of your useful life, it's now believed that menopause served a very important purpose and was crucial in the development of society. Menopause meant that older women would no longer have children, and yet they would still be alive and healthy, so that they were in a good position to help their grandchildren, their daughters, be mothers and help with the care of their grandchildren. And that this was absolutely crucial in the development of society. So there's good reason to say, menopause is a really positive thing. It signals a new, different, but very useful time of your life. And, you need an employer who helps you manage it.
Wow, I love that new definition. That sounds really, really good. Okay, we're going to come to questions. Whilst I just let everybody get to the keyboard and just make sure they've asked what they need to. Wendy, is there anything you want to say about how people can speak out and can, help you as a fantastic pharmaceutical company understand what women prioritize, what they need, what they want?
Sorry about that. Somehow I got muted. I think we've all talked about it today. is that we need to talk. We need to make sure people are listening. And the more people and more women that unmute themselves, the more successful we're going to be. Just the 3 and 4 of us talking about it, if we can create a ripple effect where we have more and more and more women speaking and redefining, we'll make a lot of progress. I think one of the things that's really key that I have found is sort of like anchoring in and creating community and networks that are willing to talk and advocate and provide information, like we were just talking about here, and even to our children and our children's, because we're much more powerful when we're together. And that's one of the reasons I felt, Edwina, so connected to the female lead since I've been introduced to you all, because you're creating this community that's so strong where women's voices can be heard. And I hope that people will take a minute to visit hereforherhealth.com and share your points of view and your experience. It's really simple. We want to hear from as many women as possible so we can share all these insights and all this, what we're gleaning and learning. And that simple step, your voice can help be heard on what healthcare needs you have or felt, or you feel may have been met or not met. And finally, I just want to say, if you can give me one more minute, using this hashtag Women Unmuted, again, we want women to find their voice and share their thoughts and experience. I feel like since I've joined Organon, I am so much more bold in sharing my own personal experiences and trying to push women that I work with to share their personal experiences, because it's helping other women to feel bolder in sharing their experiences and creating more of this global community. It was a little scary at first, but putting out your authentic self, when especially you've been brought up never to share any of this kind of personal information in the community and especially in the workplace. But we're not really keeping our public and private lives as separate anymore. And the pandemic has really broken down this wall. So talking about things like menstruation and menopause and kind of all the things after and in between really helps encourage people within your company talk about it as well. And so I hope that all of us can really help empower those around us to be able to have that open voice and that open mind to speak about these things and give voice to these issues.
Thank you. That's such a strong, fresh perspective. Thank you. Okay, we're going to have some questions now. There are lots out there, I know. Okay, here we go. Maybe Dr. Apter, you can answer this one. Some of my best employees are women in their 60s. How can I get them to open up?
Well, I found that women are very good at reflecting on menopause and what it means to them and how they hope to negotiate. But because menopause has such negative associations that we've talked about, aging, uselessness, invisibility, that they may need some evidence that you're really willing to listen to them, listen to their story, listen to its impact. We have to remember that the symptoms of menopause vary widely, and sometimes what bothers a woman is not the physical symptoms as much as its symbolic meaning, what it means to her in terms of this is a change in my life, and maybe I want to rejig my priorities, maybe I want to think about the terms on which I work more in a different way. So if you signal you really want to hear them, and you can do this by, first of all, simple things, giving them time to speak, not assuming that you know either the answer or even the question, and also feeling comfortable yourself, that you're not patronizing them, you're not doing them a big favor by listening to this, you're really interested in this. Then I found that women will be open and very articulate about the subject.
Wonderful. Thank you. Have we another question, please, Lauren? I have female co-workers who suffer all day from period pain but don't ask for support. How can I help them without being too intrusive? Dr. Chambers, maybe you'd speak to this one.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And so, the idea of being too intrusive is always something that we wrestle with, especially in the workplace. You want to be professional, you don't want to bring up anything, and you definitely don't want to imply that someone is suffering or incapable of performing their duties. What I tend to do and what I think works well is just opening up and saying, I used to think that I couldn't bring up my migraines, but I found that our supervisor is so compassionate about that. And so I mentioned that I had a migraine. I was able to delay my work. I didn't ask for, a delay of the deadline, but I was able to work in an environment that supported me, that allowed me to recover from what I was dealing with from a health standpoint, and still allowed me to succeed and express myself as a capable employee. And so sometimes you don't need to pry into their space, but open up about yourself to lead with vulnerability and to say that this is a safe space. And I've walked this before. And so not only do you not need to be muted, but this environment actually cares.
And the caring thing seems kind of the respectful, very contemporary way of dealing with all these challenges. It seems so obvious when you say it, but we've been living with old models for so long that, we hide reality, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do we have another question? I think we're running out of time, but okay, this one sounds like for you, Wendy. How does Organon encourage women to unmute in company workplaces around the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, Organon has really established a platform around listening, and this definitely applies to our employees internally. I hope that our employees would agree that they've seen that inside our company, and creating moments where we just listen creates this incredibly positive culture that we're building, and an environment where women's issues are seen and heard. So just one little example is we created a program. We wanted to leverage the spirit of this called Take the Mic. And we've had people from all over the world come, both female, women and men, and we give them this metaphorical microphone to people from different countries with different issues. We've learned so much about each other, and assumptions that you make get broken down very quickly. That's one of the beauties of unmuting people, that you really get to see what's really happening there, and you get to learn a lot. So we've done this all around the world, and we've talked about issues that mean most to people, and we have a lot of other initiatives in place. So we'll probably take another one of these calls where we take time to ask questions and be there for her. So we have heard from many that what we are doing is inspiring to them, and it's helping them come out of their shells and unmute themselves. And we really hope we can continue to do this and inspire and lead by example.
Brilliant. Thank you. I understand we have one more question, which is for all of you. So maybe, this is nice. Maybe we can be to the point, but how do we include men in this conversation? Who's brave enough to go first?
I honestly, I always welcome men into the conversation. I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we say this is only a women's issue. First of all, I use the term menstruators a lot when I'm talking about people with periods, because not all women have periods, and not all people who have periods identify as women. And I think that's important to understand. Additionally, fathers, brothers, partners, we all need to be aware and brought into this conversation. I would say we're not calling you out, we're calling you in. And if you feel like it's important to support your partner, mother, daughter, friend, this is a place in which you need to support them too. And it requires you to be committed, to be compassionate, and to learn something about it.
So I'll go next as the, so men must be part of the conversation. That is a must. And I think men want to be part of the conversation from what I've seen. It has been so inspiring to me, and I said this to our CEO a few months ago, to see what men have brought to the table, their passion, that they want to talk about things that they've experienced and their wives and sisters and nieces and family friends have experienced as well, and that they're kind of ripping off the bandage and saying, hey, I want to talk about this too, and talk about various things. So men are integral to this, and I think we would all really appreciate their input and support and their know-how.
Yeah, I think men would really benefit from seeing these conversations, because they often feel shut out. A lot of their it's women's business is not because they dislike it or because they don't care, but they really feel inept. They don't feel they know how to do it. And so a lot of men would really welcome seeing these conversations, seeing that their input is welcome and valued. And don't forget, the kind of thing we're talking about in terms of diversity doesn't apply only to women. Having a workplace where there's greater responsiveness to individual needs will help women as well as men.
A point very well made. And I have to say, my favorite quote of this session is not calling men out, but calling them in. I think that is just beautifully said, Dr. Chambers. Absolutely wonderful. So I'm afraid that's all. We go so quickly. That's all we have time for. But you know, I really hope that our conversation today helps to introduce a new and more open conversation for everyone out there. I think the first step is to take the lead in our own lives and our own health, and to ask and frame the right questions. So thank you, our beautiful female lead audience, and thank you to our wonderful experts, Dr. Charis Chambers, Dr. Terri Apter, and Wendy Lund. Thank you.
Thank you.